a lot of the times, essentially, the asylum seekers or refugees are kind of, trying to present quote unquote clean narrative or image, right, to the institution, so that there's a more guarantee of acceptance, for a lack of a better word. I think you can elaborate on that. Is that really the case, and how do they navigate that? And then on top of that, when the rejection is so high, when the right of livelihood may not exist, how do you, even if like someone like you, right, who's from that country, who's from that space, who's trying to maybe support them, how do they not feel distrust of you or the government or any institution for that matter, where they're trying to seek refuge, which is often keeping them at arm's length at times?
I think you pinpoint an issue which I was made to become very obviously very intimately familiar with, in that when someone comes to a new country in which they don't necessarily speak the language, they don't know how the system works, like they don't have any contacts, like they have no idea like who is on their side, who isn't. There's a looming threat of maybe being deported. Right, you don't really know exactly like who. Like even if you go to like a law, like are these people like truly there to like support me in my case, or are these people like somehow people who are there to work with the government to somehow just expedite my claim and just send me back home, right? You don't know, so like that definitely distrust, right? Because and not even like factoring in like perhaps the sheer range of like circumstances that in which their trust with the actors that they have interacted with has been broken in finding themselves in the place that they are now in Hong Kong or wherever. People, often is the case that with, migrants who somehow get, promised that they will be able to, go somewhere and then actually are taken somewhere else, or how they end up in being trafficked to one place or the other. Like, how can you even trust like who it is that you are interacting with? And that was on the very first day of working at Daly & Associates. I had to become intimately familiar with that because there was a client who we suspected was a victim of human trafficking. And without any training like whatsoever of interacting with someone with this lived experience, I was sent into the room to take notes of to understand what support we can provide. She was like very hesitant to kind of tell me anything.
Of course.
And there's also, of course, the gender dynamic in that I was a man, and she had been subjected to sexual violence, and that distrust. There's multiple levels. It's are these people going to help me? Can I share these kind of very intimate details of what's happened to me with someone else? And then I remember I was told by a supervisor to kind of accompany her to the police station to ask her to give a kind of statement to them about what's happened. And then she just refused to go to the station, and actually had a mental breakdown outside in the street, because I later learned to realize that where we were headed towards also was the area in which I understand that she was kidnapped or taken back by the gang, the trafficking gang that she had been forced to interact with, and that police station was in the premises in which that gang had been operating in. So just physically being in that kind of area was traumatic for her. And these are things which you don't even realize, right? So that distrust is something that trust building is probably the most key thing that you need to do at the beginning to understand what it is, and hold a space for a client to just feel safe. If you don't do that, I think the ability to actually meaningfully support them and advocate for them becomes significantly constrained, because then they aren't even able to kind of they don't have the willingness to even share the narrative of what has happened to them, because they don't even trust that you would be able to help them. So, and then the problem with many asylum systems is that because they're not trauma informed, there's this expectation, especially and it may not necessarily be like a written expectation, but it's like a intellectual expectation that you would be able to carry a fully scripted like a narrative of exactly everything that has happened in your life, and that there would be no internal inconsistency, despite the fact that, you know, like most psychological like kind of like studies point to the fact that when one experiences trauma, that causes like fragmentation in your own memories, right, as like a protective like mechanism. And so then I've seen it countless times where like, oh, you said that the car that kidnapped you was dark blue, and then this other interview you said it was blue. Is it dark blue or blue? Or was there even a car? You know, and then you know, especially with like you know, an immigration officer who, you know, may have like the imperative to, you know, not necessarily want to be granting you protection, you know, like the line of questioning, if it's not facilitative, if it's not in legal terms what's called a joint endeavor, in which you are engaging in a collaborative fact-finding exercise. If it's the case in which like one is like trying to just interrogate you with like yeah, so what happened like here, and why didn't you say this earlier, and all of this, like in so many ways, like asylum seekers get like unfairly blamed for not having a fully consistent narrative and held to a standard which 99% of like humans can't hold themselves. Like, you know, if you ask me like what did I eat for breakfast like 2 days ago, I can't even tell you like right now like what I had, you know. So like the fact that you can now suddenly, and then imagine like if say you've had to be in the system like for decades, now you're suddenly talking about trying to recall conversations or experiences that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like maybe often without like, you know, written record, or like, you know, how can you then, like how is it even possible to maintain that like full consistency?
No, for sure. I think, I mean, just remembering so much. Yeah. And I would think like someone would also doubt you in case you remember something perfectly, because then they may say, oh, you have, you know, you have remembered it, you have like, you know, dictated it again and again so much.
You can't win.
That's a problem as well.
If the script is too perfect, all of a sudden, oh yeah, you know, it's like something is suspicious going on here that like, you know, you seem to be able to recall everything. Like, you know, it's just really like, I've seen that as well. I've seen like, that like, you know, you have that particular narrative. It seems, you know, it seems too perfect to be true. Yeah. And so there must be something that signifies that you cannot, like, that's also like, that's also viewed as like a like, or has been viewed as like a negative credibility indicator. So how do you win in that circumstance where, you have an inconsistent narrative? That's a problem. Consistent narrative, that's also a problem.